Prince Edward's recent decision to leave Buckingham Palace has certainly turned heads in the royal circle and beyond. What could have led him, the youngest child of the late Queen Elizabeth II, to make such a big move? Is it about wanting more freedom, a personal rift with his family, or just another step in the evolving roles of today's royal family? Let's take a closer look at this unexpected development and explore what might be driving him, the potential impacts, and what it could mean for the future of the House of Windsor. This shocking announcement comes from Prince Edward, Queen Elizabeth II, and Prince Philip's youngest son, who has always stood a bit apart from his royal siblings. It's hard to fully explain what it's like to be together as a family for the first time. It's just something special. Born on March 10, 1964 at Buckingham Palace, Edward grew up in the spotlight but often preferred a quieter, more behind-the-scenes role in the monarchy. Unlike his older brothers, King Charles III and Prince Andrew, Edward didn't follow the traditional military path. Instead, he went on to make his own way in the arts and media. After earning a history degree from Cambridge University, Edward worked briefly with the theater company founded by Andrew Lloyd Webber before starting his own production company, Ardent Productions, in 1993. While his company faced some criticism over management and content, it showed Edward's determination to carve out his own identity apart from the royal family. And this is where things get even more intriguing. In 1999, Edward married Sophie Rhys-Jones, now the Duchess of Edinburgh. When they first appeared together in public as a married couple, royal protocols were probably the last thing on their minds. Over the years, the couple has become a well-known and prominent part of the royal family. Edward has taken on a fair share of royal duties over the years, becoming the Earl of Wessex and later stepping into the role of Duke of Edinburgh following his father's death. His role in the monarchy grew, but his more reserved approach often contrasted with the more attention-grabbing actions of other royals. In a surprising move, though, Prince Edward recently announced that he would be stepping away from Buckingham Palace, signaling a shift in his royal path. It's been a bit of a shock. No matter how much you try to prepare for something like this, it still hits hard, and it's incredibly sad. Such decisions from Edward aren't completely out of the blue, but they certainly catch people off guard. After all, this is the same Edward who, at just 22 years old, made the bold choice to step away from a future in the Royal Marines. At the time, he had been training intensely to earn the prestigious Green Beret of Britain's elite military unit. But after 4 months of a year-long officer training course, he chose to resign. His decision came after a lot of personal reflection and a tough family discussion. Buckingham Palace confirmed that he resigned with a heavy heart, saying that the Marines just weren't the right fit for his long-term goals. They also noted that there was no immediate announcement about his next move. Edward's resignation followed a weekend summit at the royal family's Sandringham estate in Norfolk, where he presented his case. The conversation was reportedly tough, involving the Queen, Prince Philip, his older brothers Prince Charles and Prince Andrew, and Princess Diana. While no one in the family was said to have supported his decision, Edward remained firm, explaining that continuing with a military career just wasn't right for him. Edward's decision to leave the Royal Marines, despite a strong family military tradition, came after a meeting where he made it clear that staying in the military would leave him feeling trapped. After the tough conversation at Sandringham, Edward returned to his training base in Limestone, southwestern England, where he formally handed in his resignation and his uniform to his commanding officer. The farewell was described as a respectful moment, with Edward shaking hands and wishing his fellow officers well, and they returned the gesture. Prince Philip, who held the honorary title of Captain General of the Marines, was reportedly not pleased with Edward's decision. It was seen by some as a rejection of the family's strong military roots, especially since both his father and older brothers had served in the Royal Navy. Edward's decision to step away became public when London newspapers picked up on it, and a poll revealed that most Brits supported his right to leave if that was his choice, reflecting a growing public respect for the younger royal's independence. But why would Edward walk away from a path so deeply tied to family legacy? For him, the answer was personal fulfillment. Reports suggested he had a growing interest in theater, a passion that was far removed from the structured life of the military. Despite the disapproval and pressure from his family, Edward chose to put his own happiness and dreams ahead of royal tradition. Was this a sign of weakness, as some critics suggested, or an act of courage in defying expectations. In many ways, it was a courageous decision, showing Edward's ability to stand firm under immense pressure and make a choice that was true to himself. A move that resonates with people who value authenticity over following tradition blindly. Now, with his recent decision to step away from Buckingham Palace, many are left speculating about his motivations. Buckingham Palace has always been the heart of royal life, so Edward's departure feels particularly significant. Reports suggest that he and Sophie now plan to focus on their home at Bagshot Park in Surrey. Their move comes at a time when the royal family under King Charles III is undergoing major changes, as he works to streamline the monarchy and redefine its role in modern Britain. Edward's decision to leave Buckingham Palace could be seen as his way of supporting the king's vision, while carving out a more personal, family-focused lifestyle. It raises interesting questions about how royal responsibilities are changing, and how royals are balancing their public duties with their personal lives. Edward's move follows in the footsteps of other royals like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, who have redefined their roles within the family. However, unlike Harry's highly publicized departure, Edward's exit appears to be more of a quiet transition rather than a break from royal life altogether. He still remains committed to his royal duties, including his involvement with the Duke of Edinburgh's award and various patronages. His departure marks a subtle but significant shift in how the monarchy adapts to modern expectations, while still respecting the individuality of its members. As Prince Edward steps away from Buckingham Palace, his future moves will shape his legacy. By focusing on family life and charitable work, he continues to embody the values of dedication and service instilled by his parents, Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip. However, it's worth considering what could drive someone to walk away from everything Buckingham Palace represents. For Edward, the constant criticism, pressure, and lack of freedom that come with being a royal can be overwhelming. Every mistake is magnified, and the media's harsh spotlight on him, alongside tensions within the family, likely made the idea of living outside the royal bubble more appealing. The strict rules and high expectations of royal life can feel suffocating, especially for someone wanting to live life on their own terms. For Edward, stepping away from Buckingham Palace might have seemed like the only way to escape. His attempts to break free from royal life and make a name for himself in the entertainment industry was a bold and rocky journey. Edward had always been intrigued by the world of show business, once saying he loved its glamour and fantasy. His goal was to inspire people to get involved in creative activities. While his early ventures into entertainment reflected his passion and ambition, they were also met with controversy, especially during his time at Cambridge. Edward's foray into the entertainment world began with school plays, and later he produced the Grand Knockout Tournament in 1987, a charity event that was ridiculed as one of the most damaging things to the royal family since Cromwell's time. Undeterred by the criticism, Edward joined Andrew Lloyd Webber's Really Useful Group and co-founded a theatrical production company in 1990. However, this venture failed within a year, leaving him with a staggering $600,000 in debt. In 1993, Edward took his most daring step yet. He launched Ardent Productions, a company he said symbolized ambition, motivation, and strength, with the aim of producing serious drama and documentaries for British television. He downplayed his royal connections, making it clear that Ardent wouldn't focus on royal-themed programs. His business card simply read, Edward Windsor, Joint Managing Director. However, the entertainment industry was skeptical. Many saw him as just a prince dabbling in production, and he faced plenty of jealousy and criticism. His family was also doubtful, with Prince Philip reportedly joking that Edward should just let the TV people do their work and turn up to collect the checks, claiming he was making the royal family look foolish. These concerns seemed justified as Ardent stumbled in its early years. The company's first production, Real Tennis, a documentary about an obscure aristocratic sport, attracted just 8,000 viewers. The next project, the political satire Annie's Bar, was canceled after one season and widely panned as second-rate. Faced with mounting criticism and financial struggles, Edward made a pivot in 1996. He hosted Edward on Edward, a documentary about his great-uncle Edward VII. While critics mocked the program for lacking depth and originality, it actually performed surprisingly well. However, Edward's decision to lean into his royal connections only sparked more backlash. Journalists accused him of hypocrisy, and competitors resented the support Ardent received from the palace, including exclusive footage and interviews with senior royals. But the story doesn't end there. Wait until you hear what happened next. Edward's struggles weren't just about his business ventures. His wife, Sophie, also faced her own scandals. In 2001, she was tricked by a fake sheikh who posed as a PR client, and this, combined with Edward's growing controversies, led to a review of the royal family's commercial dealings. By 2001, the royal family had introduced stricter guidelines for working royals involved in business. One of Ardent's biggest mistakes came in 2000 when it started producing Royalty As, a series for E! That covered the Windsor family's history, including some recent and sensitive events. This especially riled up Prince Charles when it was revealed that Ardent had filmed near Prince William while he was at St. Andrews. Charles reportedly lost his temper, calling Edward a negative name. Public criticism of Ardent reached a peak, with many calling it a vanity project and a sad joke. By 2002, Edward admitted defeat and stepped down from Ardent, citing the Queen's Golden Jubilee and his increasing royal duties as the reasons. Despite his optimistic farewell statement, Ardent struggled on for a while before being liquidated in 2009 and officially dissolved in 2011, with just 40 staff remaining. Though his dreams of media success ended, Edward and Sophie eventually found their footing as full-time working royals, earning respect for their dedication. In the years after the Queen's death, as Prince Andrew faced scandals and Harry and Meghan went their own way, Edward's struggles highlighted the difficulty of balancing royal identity with personal ambition, a challenge that Harry and Meghan are likely grappling with as well. As Edward once put it, it's a no-win situation, so it doesn't matter which side of the fence you jump off. Now let's take a look at what life was like for Edward at Buckingham Palace before he made the decision to leave. As the youngest of the Queen's 4 children, Edward's life at Buckingham Palace was both privileged and highly structured. Surrounded by the grandeur of royal living, Edward had a unique upbringing that balanced formal protocol with a warm family atmosphere. Buckingham Palace, as both a home and the official residence of the monarch, was a place filled with ceremonial duties and strict discipline. Edward, like his siblings Charles, Anne, and Andrew, was cared for by a team of nannies and staff, but also closely watched over by his parents. Despite their busy schedules, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip always made time for family, often gathering in the private quarters of Buckingham Palace for meals or evening chats. In Edward's early years, there were the big ceremonial moments of state visits, but his days were also filled with play in the vast gardens of the palace. Buckingham Palace wasn't just the family's official residence. It was a place where Edward was encouraged to pursue his academic and artistic passions. He received private schooling before attending Gordonstoun School in Scotland, following in the footsteps of his father and brother. Edward's love for drama and theater began early and continued to grow while he was at Cambridge University, where he earned a degree in history. After returning to Buckingham Palace following his studies, Edward started taking on royal duties while also exploring a career in the arts. He worked briefly with Andrew Lloyd Webber's theater company before founding Ardent Productions, a television production company. This decision set him apart from his siblings, as he blended creative ambitions with his royal responsibilities. As Edward took on more royal duties, Buckingham Palace remained a central part of his life, whether he was hosting receptions or attending official events. It symbolized both his public responsibilities and private family connections. Edward also spent time living at Buckingham Palace before settling down at Bagshot Park with his wife, Sophie, Countess of Wessex. But here's an interesting detail. Prince Andrew reportedly bullied his younger brother Edward during their childhood. Royal biographer Ingrid Seward shared that despite being a slightly wayward son, Andrew had a more domineering behavior toward Edward. Seward recalls how Edward, a more sensitive character, would often avoid the press and express his dislike for it, while Andrew, perhaps more accustomed to the spotlight, would try to comfort him with understanding words. Despite Andrew's behavior, Edward eventually outshone him in many ways. At Gordonstoun, Edward excelled academically and socially, surpassing Andrew by becoming head boy and making the first cricket team. In her 1993 book, Royal Children, Seward detailed how the two brothers' relationship evolved, noting that they were 4 years apart and much younger than their older siblings. Prince Charles and Princess Anne had their own unique roles and responsibilities within the royal family. but neither Andrew nor Edward faced the intense pressure of being the Queen's heir or only daughter. Andrew, known for his boisterous nature and frequent tantrums, often displayed competitive behavior, even snatching treats meant for Edward. In contrast, Edward was seen as a sweet, well-mannered child with delicate features, who initially lived in Andrew's shadow during their early education at Buckingham Palace. While Andrew would express his frustration through outbursts, Edward internalized his feelings, often falling silent and turning red. As they got older, Edward distinguished himself at Gordonstown, excelling in sports, drama, and leadership, while Andrew's path veered more toward military service. Edward eventually attended Cambridge University, although his grades were notably below the usual standard for admission. Meanwhile, Andrew joined the Navy and found considerable success. Edward, who initially planned to follow a similar path by joining the Royal Marines, withdrew after just 4 months of officer training. This decision was met with disappointment, but the palace respected and understood his reasons. Edward's decision to step away from a military career in favor of a different life was one that shifted him into a more private sphere. But was this life truly private? And what challenges did it bring? Keep watching to find out. The Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward, and his wife Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, have long been dedicated supporters of the crown and have been held in high regard by the late Queen Elizabeth II. Despite their significant roles within the royal family, they've worked hard to maintain a low profile when it comes to their personal lives. Edward and Sophie's commitment to privacy has made them less familiar to many royal fans compared to other more high-profile members of the family. However, Edward is far from an enigma. Over the years, he has taken on increasingly important responsibilities, becoming a key member of the royal family. His story reveals many fascinating and complex layers, including rumored sibling feuds, disagreements over royal titles, and a strained relationship with the press. These aspects give a glimpse into a man who is often misunderstood. One of the most visible parts of royal duty is public engagement, where royals traditionally meet their subjects at events, often greeting them with a handshake. This practice, known as a walkabout, was popularized by Queen Elizabeth II, who wanted to have a more personal connection with her people. Over time, this tradition was adopted by other royals, like Princess Diana and Kate Middleton. However, Edward has chosen to approach this tradition differently. While he waves and speaks to the crowds, he avoids shaking hands. He explains that this allows him to speak to more people in the limited time available. His decision, while practical, highlights his unique approach to balancing royal tradition with personal efficiency. Edward's personal life, especially his relationship with Sophie, also reflects his desire for balance and discretion. Their story began in 1987 when they met at Capital Radio, where Sophie worked in public relations. They reconnected years later when Sophie was managing publicity for a charity tennis event Edward was organizing. They started dating in secret, keeping their relationship away from the public eye. Despite their best efforts, the press eventually caught on, prompting Edward to appeal directly to the media, asking for respect for their privacy and for Sophie, whom he wanted to protect from intrusive coverage. As their relationship became public, Sophie began attending royal events with Edward, but the couple resisted pressure from the media to rush into an engagement. It took 6 years before they got married. Edward, having seen the turbulent relationships of his older siblings, was determined not to repeat their mistakes. This cautious approach showed his commitment to building a solid, stable foundation for their life together. In his early years, Prince Edward's attempts to shield his private life often backfired. His rare television interview about his relationship with Sophie, intended to calm public speculation, instead left some with a negative impression. His strong insistence on wanting privacy was interpreted by some as arrogance. At one point, Edward bluntly told reporters to mind their own business regarding his decision to propose. While his frustration was understandable, his tone alienated parts of the public, leading to criticism of his attitude. When Edward and Sophie received their new titles as the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh in March 2023, their first public appearance sparked both admiration and concern. The couple met with members of the Ukrainian community outside Edinburgh's city chambers, and their graceful step into their new roles delighted royal fans. However, many observers noticed that Edward appeared noticeably thinner, leading to speculation that he might be unwell. Some wondered if stress or grief from losing both his parents in quick succession was affecting him. Despite these public concerns, no official sources have confirmed any health issues, and Buckingham Palace assured the media that Prince Edward was fine, though no concrete proof was provided. Edward was granted the title of Duke of Edinburgh by King Charles for his 59th birthday in March 2023, fulfilling a long-held wish of their late father, Prince Philip. The title had been held by Prince Philip for more than 70 years, and it had been rumored that Queen Elizabeth had promised it to Edward before her passing. However, the process was not as straightforward as expected. Initially, King Charles considered saving the title for his granddaughter, Princess Charlotte, as part of his efforts to modernize and slim down the monarchy. This decision reportedly hurt Edward, who had been a loyal supporter of Charles, especially during the controversies involving their brother, Prince Andrew. Ultimately, King Charles decided to honor his younger brother by granting him the title, but some sources speculate that the title may revert to the crown after Edward's death rather than passing to him. Prince Edward's title choice is an interesting reflection of his personal preferences and individuality. In 1999, on his wedding day, Edward requested to be named Earl of Wessex, rather than receiving a traditional dukedom. According to reports, he was inspired by the character Lord Wessex in the film Shakespeare in Love and asked the Queen for this unique title. This request marked Edward as the first of Queen Elizabeth's sons not to hold a dukedom, a significant and personal decision that reflected his desire to carve out his own path. After their marriage, Edward and Sophie initially balanced private careers alongside their royal duties. However, by 2002, they transitioned into full-time royal roles, coinciding with the Queen's Golden Jubilee year. Over time, their focus became increasingly centered on their royal responsibilities, with Sophie championing programs for women and children, while Edward supported the arts through his royal patronages. Now, as the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, they have taken on even greater responsibilities. Their work reflects the legacy of Prince Philip, with Edward following in his father's footsteps while also continuing to carve out his own unique path in royal service. Over the years, perceptions of Edward and Sophie have softened, with their dedication to royal duties and their enduring marriage earning them respect and admiration. The story of Edward and Sophie is one of striving to balance public responsibilities with personal values, showing the complexity of living under constant public scrutiny. In hindsight, Edward's fierce defense of his personal life can be seen as both a misstep and a necessary stand for his principles, highlighting the challenges of reconciling royal expectations with individual desires. If you were in Prince Edward's shoes, would you leave everything behind to find your own path in life? The balance between personal fulfillment and duty is a question many might ask themselves, especially in a position as complex as his.